Hi, today I want to catch you up with the print and to do a bit of inking. So if you look at these two examples here, I've actually done some inking in between talking to you last and what I'm going to show you today, and with enormous restraint I haven't inked the whole edition. I've kept one back to show you. So if you look here, this is how the print looked when I last showed you. And if you look here, you can see the inking that I have done. So if you saw yesterday's video where I was talking about leaving inks overnight, you remember that I was using opaque white, which was going down in the foreground, and then those two different very extended blues, which are doing the shadows here. So in terms of what I've done, you can see that, like I said, this white here is quite subtle. So I've put another coat of white and I've actually run the white a little higher up the tree this time. So that's made quite a difference to the impact of the white on the foreground of the print. And here I had these sort of bluey white hills, and I've added a shadow in the paler blue, and then I've dropped another shadow behind in the darker blue. Now, one of the things that I'm going to show you in a sec is I'm going to ink the pale blue over everything, and then I'm just going to drop a darker blue shadow over the top of that layer. Now, that is obviously going to be wet ink sitting on top of wet ink, and one of the things that I've been asked about is this business of, can you print wet on wet? Does the ink have to dry every time? And the answer is, it's a little bit complicated, but basically in an absolutely ideal world, as far as I'm concerned, every single layer would be bone dry before I put the next layer on. Now, for that perfect world to happen, I would have to be a lot more patient than I am, because I am not a patient person and I have real trouble with that. So what I usually do is I might have 2 or 3 prints going at the same time, so that I can there's always something that I can be getting on with while I'm waiting for the drying to happen. However, because I use such very, very thin layers of oil-based ink, I can get away with the odd double layering, wet on wet inking, and it doesn't affect things. But let me emphasise, you need to be really careful about that. If you're just starting out, then one of the most disappointing things can be rushing something, not letting it dry, and then as you go, your layer wet on wet gets clumsier and squidgier, and you lose any crispness. The other thing I would say is that wet on wet, personally for me, has never ever worked with water-based inks. And I use water-based inks to teach with in my classes, and we do always make sure that the ink is dry between layers. So it's a good idea to keep things crisp, keep things dry. So when I get to the sort of last few layers of a print, then the fine detail, I will always make sure that the print is dry before I drop those layers in. So when I come to the delicate branches of the tree, for example, then I'll make sure everything's bone dry, because the last thing I want is sort of squelchy soft ink. So that's what I've been doing. Let me just show you the lino as well. That's safe. And here is my bit of lino. And let's put that on there. If I put that on there, you can see how transparent the paper is, this washi paper is. So with the mountain, let me just move it over a little bit so you can see both clearly. With the mountain area here, when I painted it, I was originally going to cut this bit out before I did the blue shadows. And I started cutting over here. And as I was cutting, I was thinking, actually, it would be nice to put some direction and dimension in by having this side in shadow. So instead of cutting that bit out, what I did was to just focus on this side of it. And I make decisions like that all the time, because if something better comes up, then I will always go with something better. which kind of goes back to that film I did in the beginning where I was talking to you about how I plan a print, and I have a sort of kicking off point and then I just go with what I like best at the time as I go on. So that's what's happened there. And in another film I want to show you painting the texture of the tree trunk onto the tree and tying it up with the light direction. So I'll do that on another film. So that's basically where I'm at. So now I am going to do some inking up and show you how I've got to this point.